Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Team Comp Tuesday, the weekly series where every Tuesday we go over a different team in Genshin, be they a meta team, a more fun team, or somewhere in between. This week we'll be continuing our trend of using Anemo characters as essentially as other elemental characters. Previously we used Kazuha and Venti as pyro characters in a burning style team, and we used Jean as a pyro trigger and a reverse melt team last week. And this week we're going to be using, again, Kazuha and Venti, this time with some slightly different builds, in an as electro characters, basically, in a aggravate team. So I hope you'll stick around, even though this build will be relatively similar to the burning build. I do have some fun tech for this setup that can make it play a little bit differently. And we do also have some different options in our character slots. If you do not have some characters, we'll talk about it. But this team is just overall pretty fun. Pretty good, actually. It's arguably relatively competitive with some of the aggravate teams. And especially probably, especially your best option if you for some reason don't have Quicken but do have Venti, or don't have Yai but do have Venti. This is definitely a very competitive version of that team. And also it's just a lot of fun because I like any excuse to spend a lot of time swirling on Kazuha and Venti. I love Anemo units. Anemo units are so much fun. But let's get into it. Alright, we're just going to do a quick little discussion or briefing of why this style of character gameplay or team works. But just really quickly, I wanted to mention that originally I thought this was going to be the Skara video. But after him being out for a bit and watching people play him in Testive, I've decided to skip Skara in favor of picking up Alhaitham next patch instead. Originally, it was one or the other. I was leaning Skara because I love Anemo characters, but he doesn't really fill what I wanted. I was kind of hoping he'd be a little bit better, a little bit less clunky. But, sorry to disappoint anybody. We thought maybe next week we'd do Skara, or this week is supposed to be Skara, but we're decided this instead. So, why would you want to use Anemo characters as triggers for another element? Well, one thing is because the Anemo character can actually do the swirl damage, as well as doing a hit as infusing the ability with an electro tick of damage. I don't know if you could see it there, but there were multiple instances there where you're getting a hit of Anemo damage and a hit of electro damage. And why that's important is you can then use that other hit of the element to trigger different things. So in this case, we're using it to trigger a aggravate reaction, which is Dendro on Electro. But the aggravate reaction scales with stuff like damage bonus, crit, and importantly for us, elemental mastery, which is also the main thing Swirl scales off of. So we're already going to be building our Anemo characters for EM style stuff. So we're essentially double dipping by using their electro damage to trigger the biggest possible aggravates. And that's kind of why this kind of team comp works. This is why the burning comp worked. This is why the Jean Sunfire variations work, is due to essentially being able to double dip on this Anemo, triggering your swirl reaction as well as whatever actual reaction you're trying to trigger. But let's get into some more showcases and then we'll start going through the character builds. Alright, now it's time to go on to the character builds. I figure we'll talk about the actual Dendro and Electro character first. I just want to mention really quick, a lot of my recent builds have included Nahida, as she is arguably our best Dendro option right now. But you can always feel free to substitute her with Dendro Traveler. Dendro Traveler is still a very good unit. If you're going to substitute Dendro Traveler instead, I'll just talk about this really quick. Favonius Weapon or Favonius Sword is your way to go. If not Favonius, Sacrificial. Basically, she wants Energy Recharge substat. Get Energy Recharge. Artifact, 4-piece Deep Wood, same as Nahida, with, where is it? You want an Energy Recharge Sands on her. That's the way to go if you'd be using Traveler instead. But for Nahida, same thing as always. Sack Frags is my book of choice just because it's the most convenient regardless of what kind of team she's in. If she's the driver, if she's the off-field, doesn't really matter. It's a good option for any of those styles of teams. That's personally why I like it, because I'm lazy. If not, if you are going to use her mainly as an on-field auto-attacker in this team, you could run something else, like Skyward Atlas or a damage book, but personally, I just like sticking with Sack Frags because it's convenient. Artifacts, 4-piece Deepwood, set with relatively standard setup. I have EM Sands, Dendro Damage Goblet, and Crit Rate Helm. Again, these can be swapped. For example, you could change this Crit Rate Circlet for a Elemental Mastery Circlet. And same thing with this cup. This could also be changed to Elemental Mastery. Until you hit about the 900 to 1000 range, then you don't care anymore about Elemental Mastery. But I have much better substats on these pieces, and substats matter. So if you have better substats on a more traditional damage style character, just go for it. Also, this style will be better for any Hyper Bloom or Bloom teams you do, where she isn't actually the one triggering the reaction. So this is just kind of my build that I put on her, so I don't ever have to swap anything. Talents, E is the main one. I need to actually get more of these and level this up again. Burst is also good. You should level that, but her E is her main source of damage. Alright, now here we are to talk about the Electro option in the team. There technically are a bunch of options here, but personally, Fischl is the one that I believe gives you the most damage and is the best here. Raiden is playable here, not that huge of a difference. Kaching could be playable here, not that big of a deal. I personally would either go Fischl, or if you want a healer, you can play... where is she? You play Kuki. If you're going to play Kuki, just chuck a... just chuck an Iron Sting on her and as much EM as humanly possible, and get the level her skill and burst for more healing. But again, I prefer, especially in these quick styles, quick swap teams where you're not on a lot of a character for a long period of time, it feels like you honestly have more time to dodge because you're not having to stick to such strict rotations. So you can definitely get away with playing this without a healer. Fischl, weapon, any damage-based weapon is what I would go with. Skyward Harp is the one I personally have, as it is my best damage-based weapon. Other options are stuff like Stringless is very good for her, especially in this kind of team where the Elemental Mastery subset is actually relevant, since we are talking about a reaction that scales off Elemental Mastery pretty well. Any crit bow works perfectly fine here. If you have it, something like the Windbloom Ode, also fine here. Artifacts, I have 2-piece Thundering, 2-piece Gladiator. You can go 4-piece Thundering if you have it, just to get lower cooldown on Oz, but it doesn't really make that big of a difference. So any combination of attack pieces and an electro damage set will probably be completely fine. Wanderers could be okay. 4-piece Noblesse, again, it could be okay. 4-piece Millith, kind of okay. But again, this is mainly a team that tends to scale a bit more off Elemental Mastery, so I prefer to build her like this for her own personal damage. Standard DPS style setup, attack rate on, or attack Sands, electro damage Goblet, crit rate Helm. This could be Elemental Mastery if you have a good Elemental Mastery one, but I think for Fischl, since a lot of her stuff does scale off attack, I prefer to keep her on an attack Sands. Talents, Oz is the most important one. Level up Oz. I should honestly level up Oz another time. Burst is okay, but the main reason you press her burst is just to get another Oz back down. So honestly, if you don't want to level this, you don't have to.
You are not welcome here. Let's end this now.
Alright, now it's time to go over the 2 Anemo characters we are using inside of this team comp. Venti and Kazuo are kind of unreplaceable here. They kind of are the best units for this comp due to how well they work together and their synergies, such as like... So Kazuo Burst, for example, blows people away, but Venti Burst can keep them together, so they take all the damage. Venti just stack people's up to get as many people in Kazuo E. Venti refunds energy to Kazuo, so Kazuo, who is naturally relatively energy hungry, gets plenty of energy back. You could try to use Sucrose over Venti in this comp, but I personally think these are kind of the 2 you want to go with. in part because their abilities also just have very good base damage on them as well, which does contribute to this team. But anyway, let's start with Venti. Weapon, stringless, almost always your best option on Venti. Elegy, if you have it, is great here. Elegy is a fantastic weapon and probably is one of the only 5 stars that is actually worth getting since it buffs your entire team's damage, but it has to be on the right banner. Do not roll for 5-star weapons unless you can afford it, and never roll for 5-star weapons if you aren't willing to get either weapon on the banner. So, knowing that, stringless is the bow I personally use, as it is more or less made for him. Good elemental mastery as well as skill and burst damage, as he is pretty good scaling on both of those. Artifact set is what you would expect. He is our 4-piece VV holder, full elemental mastery, Sands EM, Goblet EM, Circlet EM, Talents E, and Burst are the only ones that need leveled up. I personally think, especially in a team like this, these actually are worth leveling up, as the ratios on these are actually quite high. So the amount of base damage they do is actually not insignificant on top of the amount of swirl and aggravate damage Venti will be triggering. Just to give you an idea, my Venti has about 820 elemental mastery, and that means his... where is it? Here it is. The aggravate and spread damage is basically increased by 200%, which is a pretty good chunk considering I believe base is somewhere in the range of 3 to 4k. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5k. So getting double damage on that is pretty good. Alright, next up is Kazuha. Again, Kazuha and Venti are kind of irreplaceable. I would highly recommend running both of them together and not trying to use like Sucrose instead of one or Gene instead of one. You really kind of need both of them, which kind of makes this a luxury team. But I kind of feel like most accounts probably should roll for Venti and Kazuha anyway. But that's neither here nor there. Let's just worry about the team for now. For this setup, relatively standard in the weapon department. Iron Sting is the best option here, as we are in a double Anemo comp. We don't need the energy recharge afforded to us by something like Favonius Sword, which is what you should be defaulting to on your Kazuhas over the Iron Sting. But Iron Sting is great in this team comp. Obviously, Freedom Sworn is good if you have it. Artifacts, this is where we get a little spicy. I introduced to you the Thundering Fury Kazuha. Okay, hear me out before you go type in your weird stuff. This is actually such a good artifact set for this style of team, and it is so much more fun to play since it gives him decreased recharge on his E, and it actually makes a lot of sense. Now, he actually can use the electro damage bonus since all of his aggravates scale off electro damage, so the electro damage bonus isn't wasted. And then the 4-piece here increases the damage of electro-based reactions you do by 40%, or by 20% for aggravate and quicken. And whenever you apply a one, you get elemental CD reaction by 1 second, which is really nice and means you get more elemental skills per rotation. Now, despite the artifact set being a little weird, the stats on it aren't. The stats are very normal. Elemental mastery, elemental mastery, elemental mastery, just all across the board. Talents, you want to level his... Actually, you need a level 3, really, if you want him to do damage. This is because his E doesn't actually... The plunge attack by his E doesn't actually have its own damage modifiers, so it takes your plunge attack damage modifier from your basic attack. So for that reason, you need to level your basic attack if you want it. If you only want to level the skill that's going to give you the most damage, your burst is your main source of actual damage that doesn't come from Swirled Electro. So that's what you should level, but in general, I think Kazuha, you probably should level all 3, especially in teams where you care about his personal output. Alright, here we are at the Samurai Dude, here to do our damage rotation. This is a rough rotation, don't necessarily have to follow it. Main priority, of course, is just to keep your Electro on, so you can infuse your bursts and stuff with it. Just as a side note, this team is not necessarily the best in single target, due to the way Swirl works. If you don't know, Swirl does quadratic damage, meaning that to a degree. So basically, swirl can trigger twice. So if there's 2 enemies and you swirl on both of them, you'll actually get the swirl damage. The swirl damage has some AoE up to a max of 2 targets is basically what I'm trying to say. So this excels a lot more in 2 target plus, but isn't going to be that bad in single due to stuff like Fischl. But just keep that in mind that this is generally a team that's designed to be better in 2+ targets situations, especially in ventiable content. This is one of the best teams for ventiable content, which is just a term used for any content that can be sucked up inside of the tornado. So you just rotate through all your skills and just make sure you're getting an electro infusion on your Anemo skills. See there, I fucked it up with that venti burst, but the easy way to fix that is just to basically make sure electro is applied on the enemy before you apply the instance of Anemo damage. In that case, I believe it was only Dendra that was sitting on him at the time. But that is basically how the team works. Alright, and that's going to be it for this episode of Team Comp Tuesday. I want to thank you for coming out. I hope you enjoyed. Yeah, this is a fun team. I definitely recommend you give this a try. And definitely go back if you check out that burning video if you're interested at all in that. As that's pretty similar to this team, and it's a fun way to use Venti. I like Venti. He's a unit I never find really enough of a reason to use, despite the fact he's super strong, just due to the fact that I generally tend to play hyper carry style teams. For Abyss, I tend to play like Hu Tao, Sino, Zhao, Sino, just because those are the characters I really like. But doing this series has made, especially once we got past some of the more common teams, definitely has made me branch out and start exploring some fun teams I never thought I'd really get a chance to use. And this double Anemo core is definitely one of them. I definitely really like the double Anemo core in this team, or even in like the Gene Sunfire team. That's just a super fun team that we'll probably do more variants of that later, and we might try to mess around with some other variants of this later. There really aren't that many different versions of this. I'm sorry again if anybody was excited for the Wonder showcase, but he's not really my thing. But on the bright side, I thought I was skipping Al Hytham, and now we will be 100% getting Al Hytham, as the leaks came out, and he is, I'm not going to say anything too damning, but I'm just excited for him now, basically. But I want to thank you all for coming out. I hope you have a great day, and good luck if you're rolling on any of the banners that are out. Also, I do daily Let's Plays. We're playing Final Fantasy VII Remake and Skyrim right now, if you're interested in that. Alright, mwah.